All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here, of course, for podcast number 7.
Now, this one is going to be about fights.
Yes, specifically some of our favorite fights individually, and then we have a shared favorite fight.
Yes.
Careful, though, for spoilers going into this. We will tell you before we discuss the fights which show is about to get spoiled to some extent. So... letting you know in advance,
you have been warned.
But we will let you know prior to the fights. So before we get into that, some announcements.
Yes.
We have started Haikyuu officially on YouTube, so be sure to check out episode 1 of that. Also means that, of course, episode 2 is available for early access on our Patreon.
Yep.
But also, speaking of our Patreon, what happened?
Guys,
I know we're still kind of reeling from the whole thing.
We hit 3,000.
Y'all
are
incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're just blowing through these goals that we have set up just because of how generous and how magnanimous your guys' support is. So thank you guys so much. It means a lot. Yes, round of applause.
Absolutely.
But specifically now that means we are going to be launching our Semblance of Sanity website.
Right.
It is in the kind of early phases right now, but we'll be letting you know updates on that as it gets rolled out. But more specifically with what that means, though, with our Patreon, is we'll be having a next slot opened up at 4K.
Right.
But Jacob,
so that's what to look forward to.
That's what to look forward to, right? But what's happening on this current schedule now that we have Haikyuu in the mix?
Yeah. So it's pretty basic. Tuesdays, Hunter x Hunter. Wednesdays, Psychopaths. That's been really heating up.
Yes.
Then Thursdays, another episode of Hunter x Hunter. Fridays, MHA. Saturdays, Chibi. Along with JoJo's
Bizarre Adventure.
Yes, it is definitely bizarre and amazing. And then on Sunday, Haikyuu.
Yes, of course. So now that we have these, like this kind of full schedule getting rounded out and stuff, we're going to be moving towards getting things as ahead as possible.
Right.
So that we can start focusing on interacting with you guys even more, getting things like events set up in the Discord and such, and then also preparing for when we are adding in more slots. For our series and our channel. Also, we want to give a specific shout out to Unique Eidolon. He's one of our VIP members on Patreon. We want to thank you so much for your support.
Means a lot.
It's a really big deal, dude. And we know that giving $25 a month is no small task. So thank you so much. But specifically with fights, Jacob, we've had a lot of people ask us what makes a story good.
Right.
And not necessarily a big part of stories, but specific stories in general.
Right.
Fights can be the center point for an entire story.
And they're one of those other things, too, that oftentimes, because a lot of the times people look forward to fights so much, they end up doing the story a disservice because even if it's an amazing fight, it might not have as amazing build-up in the story or, all those other elements that really separate a good fight from an amazing fight.
Yeah, one thing that we look at a lot when we're enjoying stories that have a more action-oriented side to it is when there's a conflict between two characters, for instance, and they move towards a resolution for something like a fight. What elements does each character bring to the fight itself that separates it from, another fight in the same genre of storytelling, or even two other characters that have similar backgrounds and what have you? Or even if this is some kind of power-based show, they have similar powers, so to speak. It's the difference between what makes a show like X-Men or a show like My Hero Academia different if you were just to have someone with fire or ice powers fighting against someone else. Like, is it going to be exactly the same? No, there's all the stuff that the characters bring to the foreground.
Right. Because, if you think about it, fights are when, because stories revolve around conflict. And fights are, granted, in specific kinds of stories, but it's when words aren't enough anymore. When the conflict is so intense that one of us is going to die or at least end up in a hospital. And that should be very impressive. That should be heavy. That should be something that you absolutely can remember. It should not be forgettable.
Right. There's also an anchor aspect where the story essentially gives you the weight of the outcome of what happens here.
What are the stakes?
Yeah, what are the stakes involved? So bringing those, cleverly and presenting them well to the audience so that they're very apparent as to what happens if one of them wins and one of them loses. If you don't know that, you kind of are just looking at a kind of a spectacle on screen without any context. And context is huge in a fight. So important. Yeah. But like one of your fights you're going to bring up in particular, or your specific fight you're going to bring up in particular, is huge in context.
Yes.
It's even bigger than I would say some of my fight, the fight that I'm going to bring up in context, because I mean there's different types of context, but like you said with the heavy aspect, that's not necessarily meaning something that has to be dark or depressing, because your fight definitely has elements of being dark and depressing, but it has to have weight to it in an emotional sense, but also in a story sense.
Right. And not to say you can't have like silly and ridiculous fights, because we got one of those for One Punch Man. Like that was something.
Right.
But that is a very specific like exception, I would say, to the rule. Most of the time you can't get away with doing that, because even if you make the fight really spectacular visually, if however you do it, whether you're talking a book, a movie, a show, animated, live action, whatever, people are always getting better and better at presenting stuff.
Yes.
So that's not going to be super flashy 10 years from now. I mean, it might be, but not as much. So you need to have other stuff tied to that, so that even if it's not the best special effects anymore, even if it's not the best animation anymore,
or the best choreography,
it has that X factor to it that makes people remember it, even when there are much flashier ones to look at.
Yeah, an example would be, take a look at something like from any of the battles in Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann has this very flashy element to it, where you're looking at a lot of, I would say, samey fights there. They end up kind of blending together. But then there was a specific few, and I'm not going to spoil anything, where they are very unique. They have very special context
and
to
stakes.
it. And stakes, absolutely. The stakes have never been higher.
Yeah.
But those fights in particular are memorable, as opposed to the other ones that are, you might say, build up for the bigger fights.
Sure.
And that's a very common thing in shonen in particular, since we're talking about a lot of anime recently. Shonen fights tend to have a lot of smaller fights that build up to the bigger ones. Right. And sometimes you can do that where the fights are completely unrelated to the characters that will be involved, or not completely related to both characters that will be involved in the final fight, but they're related to one character. However, if you're really good with your writing, you can build up to a big fight with two specific characters and have them encounter each other at different points along the story in a shonen type format, where they get stronger and better, and it's this constant escalation without it feeling contrived and or forced.
Yes. And like when it fails on that aspect, those are the kinds of things that make me like, because what was it? My first anime was Naruto, and then the next one was Bleach, right? So two long-running shonen. And I remember that when I got into the later parts, I always ended up like reminiscing and longing for the earlier fights when they weren't spectacular, but because it was so early on in the story, things were so much simpler. It wasn't this grand epic proportions, must save the cosmos from whatever. It was so much easier to get behind, because it wasn't about saving the world. It was just about, there's this thing that I need to do. I need to protect this one person. I need to, whatever. I have some goal, and I need to get that, and the fight's the way to do it.
Right. Another thing that's really interesting to bring into fights in particular is that the fight is not necessarily a physical battle.
No.
It could be, really anything along the lines where two people's motivations conflict to such an extreme that they have a point where extremes meet. And one of the shows I'm going to bring up has a moment that I would say is a bigger fight than the actual fight itself. There's a part in Legend of Korra where two characters have such conflicting views on how things should go. They have an episode called When Extremes Meet, and these two extremes basically clash over viewpoints and words, and it ends up being this very tense, pulse-pounding conversation that is going to end in a fight. And when the fight starts, you go, whoa, okay, this is a fight. But the fight only lasts about 20 to 30 seconds.
Right.
Because the actual fight going on was a build-up towards this conversation. Right. And the fight was basically one or both of the characters deciding, okay, we can't talk
this through.
What's your phrase that words no longer are useful here? Basically,
we're past the point of words, or
we're past the point of words.
Yeah.
Exactly, we're past the point of just talking about it. And I think that's a great point to where fights can essentially be two characters just talking.
Right. Conversation.
There's a lot of great psychological shows out there, or stories of any type, where the actual battle just ends up being something within the minds of two people that are, at conflicting odds and motivations with each other. I'd say Sherlock stories are generally a huge kind of point for that.
Death Note did that too.
Death Note did that very well.
Even though there weren't really any battles, that was an action-packed show. If you think about all the times that Light and L are going at it in their the brains.
Yeah.
Wow. That was intense stuff.
It was really intense stuff. Okay, so would we like to get into our specific fights now?
Sure. So, do you want to go for the shared one first?
Let's go for our honorable mention first.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So before we get into our three fights, so we're going to share one from Jacob's side that he's more of a fan of than I am, and I'm going to share one that I'm going to kind of bring up my own fight in particular, and then we're going to share one that's kind of one of our all-time favorites we specifically want to bring up. So this one is from an animated movie called Sword of the Stranger.
Right.
So Jacob, tell people why they should watch
So
this fight and the movie, maybe a little bit by extension.
There's something about sword fights, right? Whether it's actual sword fights or whether it's in Star Wars where they're using lightsabers, there's just something about that is so appealing. I don't even fully understand it. But this movie is the best sword fight movie ever. It is amazing.
It is arguably one of the greatest.
Yeah.
You could say that it's not the best, but you can't argue against it being one of the greatest.
Because a lot of times people will conflate in anime and stuff, people will conflate animation with actual
art style
and stuff, and there will be things that are visually way more spectacular, like the stuff from the Fate series. Not to bash on the Fate series, their fights are amazing, but they will also have that amazing visual to it where it just looks pretty, right? And that's one of the things that they do really, really well. In Sword of the Stranger, the actual colors and stuff aren't all that amazing. It's not super flashy
because it's more realistic.
Because it's more realistic looking. But the choreography, it looks, the final battle, just look up the final battle for Sword of the Stranger or watch the movie, either one.
Right.
But the final battle, it looks like two master swordsmen dueling to the death. And it's one of those things where they're doing things that you would expect master swordsmen to be able to do, but there is no way that you would be able to get people to do that kind of stuff in live action.
No way. Because one of the things that live action fights will tend to do, especially when it comes to dangerous weapons like swords, they'll do these really fast cuts.
Yeah.
And what that'll do is that'll simulate fast movement and quick kind of choreography and such. But in Sword of the Stranger, they actually show full broad screen shots of essentially uncut, choreographed, fast, well executed swordplay,
and every little movement has a purpose. It is insane.
You can essentially bring this fight into slow motion, and you will learn
frame by frame,
and you will learn things about actual sword fights. You will see moments where you'll be like, okay, that's physically almost impossible, but then you actually slow it down, and you'll see little bits where I'm not going to bring up any spoilers about the fight, but it's involved in their snow on the battlefield, and there's parts where the person's footing gets dislodged essentially because they move too fast on top of snow and they have to catch their footing again. They try to jump when they're on snow and stuff, and they'll slide when they land.
And
there's different aspects of use of the environment. The sword play alone is great, but adding that environmental stuff as well is just really good. And then it's also not super drawn out like most anime fights are, but it's drawn out in the right places as the environment slightly changes. One of the fights that I'm going to bring up is a multi-stage, more of a spectacle fight than a high choreography fight, and I really appreciate fights or conflicts like that where the environment changes to different stages. It has almost a little bit of a video game feel, but when you do it naturally, as the story basically makes sense for it to progress in this direction, it gives for some very, very cool visual things to happen.
Because, like, if you think about it, if you had a fight where two people are just sitting there whacking at each other, that feels like a video game.
Yeah.
If like in a real fight, it would either it'd be over super quickly,
very quickly,
or it would like
5 seconds.
It would move around. There would be things that would shift. It wouldn't just be a static fight in one place.
Right.
Unless it's like open field and it's a duel or something like that.
Right. Exactly. Also, most of these weapons are dealt with that are some kind of fists or swords or something. Like, rarely you'll see us actually getting excited about a gunfight.
Right.
just to kind of bring that up.
Although
there have been some really cool ones.
There are some amazing ones, Caleb, and I'm just going to say there are some amazing gunfights that you have not seen.
I probably haven't. That's true.
You absolutely need to.
Yeah. I want to give a specific shout out to Equilibrium. This is a live action movie that is absolutely silly and ridiculous in a lot of ways. It came out around the time of The Matrix, so not as many people heard about it. But it had a fighting style that was very unique with guns, and I call it basically gun kata.
It was.
I just say go watch the movie Equilibrium, and you'll have a good time. Or you can just look up Equilibrium fight scenes on YouTube.
It's
and
ridiculous.
You'll have a lot of fun too. It's hilarious. Or you might take it completely seriously and have like the most epic time. It's really good.
Yeah.
So let's get into our actual fights. So I think you should go first, or maybe I should go first on mine because we'll cycle back to the same type of content by doing mine first.
Sure. Yeah.
Yours.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So my fight, I am going to warn you guys for spoilers on the Legend of Korra Book 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to basically spoil the Legend of Korra Book 3 finale. So please, if you haven't seen Legend of Korra, or Avatar, really, even to an extent, exit, please.
You do not want to be spoiled.
You don't want to be spoiled.
Absolutely
how about we tell us exactly what shows we're going to be doing?
Yeah, so it's Korra.
Korra for mine. Yours is Madoka
Magica, and then
both of ours is from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Right.
So if you haven't seen any of those 3 shows, basically just skip to the end where the Q&A section is.
Right.
And we'll have a timestamp
Yeah.
in comments so you can know to skip directly to that.
Exactly.
All right, is he gone? Okay, cool. So, Legend of Korra, Book 3, probably one of the most similar finales to the Avatar Last Airbender Book 3 finale in that it has a flying battle. But
it does.
I want to call out this one specifically for being multi-staged and having psychological and emotional context that goes beyond anything I believe Korra's show has done specifically for Korra's character.
And most shows don't even get to this level.
I don't think they do either, because we're going to deal with a lot of things like trauma, PTSD, and actual kind of systematic execution of the hero in a way that damages them over the long period of time. So we're not going to talk really about the aftermath too much, but I want to get into this fight really quick. I'd say it actually starts when Korra realizes that she's been captured by the Red Lotus. And once she has that conversation with Zahir and finds out what their plans are, she realizes the gravity of the situation. And we as the viewers realize the gravity of the situation, that if she dies here by this method in the Avatar state, the Avatar cycle is over. Now, it seems a little bit kind of simplified for the villains to do this, but Zahir tells us why he's doing this. And he's basically telling Korra that the world doesn't need you anymore. And when they get into having the poison basically be inside her, it's a clever way for in a fight to actually nerf your overpowered protagonist in a way that's not like the writers basically coming and putting the nerf hammer on your protagonist.
It's actually the villains being smart.
It's the villains being smart, exactly. So once the poison starts to affect her mind, she hallucinates that all of her previous villains and foes that she's fought and defeated are now basically taunting her and telling her that she's worthless, that they don't need her anymore, that she's grown weak, that she should just let go and die and just decide to die. Now, there's all this gravity to it because just because she's dying, it's not just her dying, it's actually the world descending into darkness in a way. I mean, it conflicts completely with her view that the Avatar is the end-all be-all and what
chosen
makes this
one
world what it is. But Zahir is so compelling in that the world might actually might not need her, And given how Korra's progression has been up to this point, you as the viewer might not necessarily like Korra that much to where you see, yeah, we need Korra. But by the end of this fight, you'll realize how much you do need Korra. Like, what's something that like you really like about this fight in particular?
One of the things that I absolutely love about this is that since it is the villains are not underestimating the hero. So they like when they poison her, they poison her.
Mm-hmm.
Like
describe it specifically.
Like, okay, so they basically take a metal bend some mercury. So mercury is in a liquid state, at normal temperatures, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a lot of mercury.
Yes.
Like gallons.
Well, maybe about a gallon.
Or about a gallon. They put it in her body.
They shove it into her
through
skin.
her pores.
Yeah.
And then
her arms and legs.
Yeah, and then they basically wait. Yep. And they're like, okay, so this would kill like pretty much anything, but we're pretty sure it's not going to kill her because she's the Avatar. And they're still ready. They have like all of the people still alive at this point are like setting up to kill her the second she goes into the Avatar state.
Right. So they have a pool of lava underneath her. They've got her restrained in chains, so she can't really move or do anything. There's a point actually in this where because of some really clever perspective with this whole thing, she thinks that Zahir killed her father. Yeah. So it actually begins with her like flamethrowing out of her mouth to burn him alive, and she's just too far away. So there's this futility moment where you realize even her anger isn't really enough.
Like, this is an execution.
This is an execution. Once the heroes, her friends and stuff, start to get up towards her and basically to free her, she's fighting back, actually going into the Avatar state intentionally because she knows that if she goes into the Avatar state, it's basically a matter of time until not only she dies, but all of the Avatar cycle ends. So once her will and her own resolve to keep the Avatar state from going into it, she's basically trying to let herself die outside of the Avatar state by doing this. Like that's some serious, that's huge. And that has huge psychological damage on a person too if they actually survive from this, which, she does. Yeah. So once the Avatar state triggers, of course, everyone's like, okay, good, now kill her. Now do it now. But no one really could prepare for themselves for what the Avatar state truly is. We've seen Korra a few times in the Avatar state, and she does godlike things. But at this moment, there's a lot of things where we go, okay, she'll, knock them back or something like that. No, she tears out one of the chains with the rock attached to it with some kind of enhanced strength or earthbending power or something. She smacks one of the waterbenders with it. When the lava bender tries to basically bury her in lava, she not only like blows it back at him, but dislodges herself from the whole thing, sending it back towards everyone, and they're all fleeing back. She breaks the chains off of her limbs and stuff, lands down and summons these massive rocks and just starts destroying everything. And it doesn't look like she's actually in control like she was previously. It looks like this is not Korra they're fighting. Right. This is all the previous avatars and Korra in a do or die moment where they're like, we cannot die here. Yeah. And the debilitating effects of the poison had been seen, but seemingly by the Avatar state, she's just rejecting it. Right. Her body has just become a living weapon. Yeah. So she almost destroys everyone. And Zahir, who can fly, basically goes, nope, I'm out of here. And he books it out. And she does something we've never seen an Avatar do before. It's actually something we've seen the villains do before, is where she launches fire out of her feet and becomes this Iron Man projectile. And she's launching herself towards Zahir. And what it ends up with is this massive aerial battle where she's chasing Zahir, and Zahir's like, I cannot deal with this, because he's just waiting on the time. Right,
he's just trying to with the poison. Okay,
stuff.
It'll kill her eventually, right?
But the fight is spectacular. I don't need to go into detail as to the aerial battle being spectacular. What it is, it calls back to Aang and the Fire Lord fight. It's fantastic.
It's amazing.
But when the poison finally gets her, the poison finally gets to her, she's laying on this cliffside and she's dying. She's dying. And then in this brief moment, Zahir basically realizes, okay, I've won. He goes and he basically picks her up and airbends the air like out of her lungs, choking her to death while she's dying from this mercury poison in her as well.
Yeah.
And instead of having it be a thing where some random Deus Ex Machina pulls her out of the whole thing, all the airbenders from the previous season that she had been freeing and actually like gathering together assist her with this massive tornado, and it pulls Zahir and her into it. And then Korra, is no longer being choked to death. She, wraps Zahir in one of her chains in her avatar state fury, smashes him against the ground, and the battle is over. But the tension you've been feeling the last maybe 3 minutes, I would say,
it was
so palpable, because they're also cutting between her fight and a couple other fights that are going on. And I don't want to bring attention to those. They're great, but this is what I'm focusing on. When the fight ends, you don't know if Korra is going to live.
Right.
Because
she has taken a beating.
She's taken a beating, and you've never seen anyone in the show ever before deal with something this intense. They metal bend the poison out of her, but when you realize like kind of how frail and weak she is, you're like, oh, she's irreparably damaged. And what you'll come to see later on is she lost way more than just the fight. She lost way more than just the fight. And having fights like that with real residual effects that are detrimental to the protagonist involved in the fight, it hurts.
Right.
It hurts because you care about the characters, to some extent before the fight. But even no matter how much you cared about them, you care about them so much more when you see them in this much pain and trauma.
Yes.
Anything you want to
the one thing I'd want to add to that is that the thing you said about the residual lasting negative effects, that's so important because it's that it comes with a cost. Yeah. Because fights become cheap when there's no danger. The reason that fights are so important is because they're putting everything on the line. And this fight did that for someone who gets reincarnated every time they die. So it's hard to do that for a character like that just in general. But they made it so that they didn't fully recover. And that's huge because like
so many stories, they just decide,
they just heal, time skip to when they're better, and then they just keep going. But it's like, but that's not how it works.
Right. In a way, this fight carries over beyond the actual battle. The fight with Zahir and Korra carries over well into the fourth season, the fourth book.
And it's fantastic.
And by having it do that, it's essentially a thing where Korra goes through her own really well-executed PTSD arc.
Yeah.
And ends up resolving it at some point. But that choice to have your hero be broken that much with just a fight, but not only just a fight, having it essentially be the culmination of Korra's snapping point.
Right, not just break the body, but break the mind.
Break the mind, where all the previous things she's gone through are capitulated in this massive moment of near-death experience, and it shakes her character to the core.
Yep.
And I have never seen a protagonist go through that much in such a way to where we actually get to see them go on the recovery bit, and it's not handled in a contrived way.
Yeah, it's not smooth.
It's not smooth. It's rough.
Yeah,
it's jagged.
And it makes it so much better.
It's painful
because when characters are at their, not just with characters, just people in general.
Yeah.
When you see someone at their lowest point, that's when your sympathy for them goes through the roof, just in general. Even if it's someone you don't like. And a lot of people didn't like Korra as a main character in Legend of Korra up till that point.
Yeah, and this isn't a fight just simply to engage your sympathies either.
No.
Like you can tell like at what points prior to the show they were trying to engage your sympathies or empathy a little bit with, characters that you didn't like, and they moved on with that. But this is more than that. This is way more than that. This felt like something where the entire world of Avatar changed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a fight. So maybe that's why I like specific fights like that, is that the world itself changes in a dramatic way. Quite literally, actually, if you watch the final episode, there's a very world-changing thing that happens due to Tenzin right after that fight. But it's very good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Now,
all right, so your fight. This
All
is
right.
Madoka Magica, guys.
This
If
is
you haven't
Madoka
seen
Magica.
Madoka Magica, guys,
leave now.
do not.
Okay.
You do not.
Especially like triple ESO for Madoka Magica. Just go. Ignore the fact that you're even leaving to avoid spoilers on a fight. Like just go watch the show.
Because
It's on
there's,
Netflix.
there's context here.
It's on Netflix. 12 episodes. Just watch it. You will be so happy you did.
It's in our top 10 of greatest anime.
Yeah,
of all time,
it's
so.
absolutely fantastic. So, all right, now that you're gone, and you should be gone, this is the fight. Spoilers coming up between Madoka and Kyoko versus Sayaka's witch form.
Yeah.
So, okay. This fight has context.
Mm-hmm.
The first 3 episodes of the show were basically just building up to this point where it's like, oh no, this is actually like a really dark show. Like, stuff happens and it sucks and it's crazy. Then the next 3 episodes, it shows Sayaka teetering, right? And it shows all the stuff they're doing, but then you have that episode 6.
Yeah, we know what part.
Oh, that was just insane. And it came from a place where Sayaka was at, and she was lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And like, who can't sympathize with that? Like, ugh. She was just lonely.
Yep.
So she ends up sinking into a dark place. And you're watching Madoka try and bring her back, but it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And when she finally turns into a witch, it's like there's no coming back from this. Like there isn't it. And you like can't believe it, because Sayaka was like the happy-go-lucky, all that.
It's so sad.
And it is so sad.
Yeah. And
the way they do this fight, I absolutely love. Visually, it's not super spectacular. I mean, Madoka is kind of a trippy-looking show.
Yeah.
But
I'm already getting sad just thinking about this.
Because this fight, it's not a fight to save the world.
Right.
It's a fight to save their friend.
Yeah.
And like, it's so personal. You know that there's going to be disastrous consequences if, Sayaka's witch form is able to, assault the inhabitants of their city and all that. But no, it's that
the stakes are a friend's. Their stakes are a friend's soul, essentially.
A friend's soul. Like, it's not just whether they live or die. It's like, no, they have been twisted into something else, and now it's trying to get them back. And it's not just a friend. Mm-hmm. It's Madoka, who's her best friend, and then it's Kyoko, who never really got along with Sayaka.
Yeah.
They didn't. They were like, they did not see eye to eye.
Yeah.
But even Kyoko is like, we gotta save her. Like this. Like, I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
Right.
And when they go to save her, Madoka can't do anything. So there's so many ways that this is just dramatically so good, because Madoka can't do anything. She doesn't have powers. She wants to. She wants to make the deal with the devil, but she knows where that leads, right? So she can't, which makes it even better. And then Kyoko's there. She has to defend Sayaka, defend Madoka while fighting Sayaka, who she's not a match for anyways.
Right.
As Madoka is pleading with her, just begging, hoping that there's some part of her friend in there somewhere.
And the sad thing about this whole fight is that we kind of know, based on exposition and things that have been given so far,
there's no way
it's too late.
Yeah,
and the futility of it is so heartbreaking.
But because they still hold on to it.
Well, yeah, but it's so heartbreaking because Madoka in particular, that she is the one that's feeling the burden of this whole thing, and then you realize how dangerous the whole concept of being a magical girl is, because they can become witches, and then you're like, wait, no, now Madoka could become a witch. Now anyone could become a witch, and then you're worried about those negative emotions spreading to them, and then the whole thing becomes a negative chain reaction of just depression. Awful. And it's awful because you're not only sympathizing with Sayako, who's completely Sayaka, completely twisted by this whole thing, but you feel for Madoka, who's caught in the quintessential rock in a hard place.
Yeah.
There's no good options here.
And to make matters worse, she feels guilty because Sayaka became a magical girl in order to protect Madoka. She did it, you know, to heal the guy that she liked too.
Right.
But Madoka feels responsible.
Yeah.
And it is so good. And as they see that basically now, so Kyoko is getting beaten to death, right?
Yeah.
And she's still trying to protect Madoka, and Madoka's still crying out to her, but nothing's working. And then we get to the point where Hamura comes in, and she's like, "This is madness. Let's get out of here."
Yeah.
She takes Madoka and she runs. Kyoko's like, "Go, I'll handle her." And this line, this dang line. Kyoko stays behind, and you know she's looking up at Sayaka. She takes the hairpin out, her soul gem. You know she's like going to suicide, take them both out, right?
Yeah.
And she looks at Witch Sayaka and she says, "Don't worry, I won't leave you alone. I'll be with you to the end," or something along those lines. You know, or
it just hits you,
and
it just hits you so hard.
Because it's not even... Anyone can get behind the idea of someone sacrificing themselves to save a friend. Right? Anyone can get behind that. That's pretty easy. It's like you would all like to think that you would be able to make that decision if you were in that scenario, right? But this goes beyond that. Mm-hmm. It's not... One, it's not clear that what Kyoko's doing... that there's any of Sayaka in there that she'll even notice that she's doing this. Mm-hmm. And it's not even that she's doing it to save Sayaka. She's letting herself die because she just doesn't want Sayaka to be alone.
And
she doesn't want her to die alone.
That's love.
That is love. Like oh my gosh.
And it's handled in such a way to where you know that this is something that this is something that's going to have a lasting effect on Madoka, but it's also something to where you can see how it's a huge step for her character to make this kind of sacrifice.
Absolutely. Because Kyoko was all about living for herself.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of where we had seen this character's development and arc kind of going, this was something that was huge for her. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a sacrifice that was from the obvious friend and stuff. If anything, Madoka would have been the more obvious person to make this kind of a sacrifice if she could have. But Madoka doesn't have the ability to, and Madoka can't bring herself to do the thing that she sees is actually the cause of all this pain. So it has huge context in the show as a whole, but it has even greater context within the characters of Madoka Magica. So if our little bit didn't convince you that that's one of the greatest fights, if you've already seen it, go and rewatch it.
Yeah, it's
and maybe rewatch
so
the fight and the episodes surrounding it, because it does a number on not only you as the viewer but also the characters surrounding Sayaka.
And even after that fight, after that fight, there's this lull in the story where it's just that happened, mm-hmm. And there's this is full on end game now. There's no going back. Mm-hmm. that was a point of no return.
Mm-hmm. There's some obvious puns in there,
which adds so much to what happens with Hamura later, because you're like, oh crap, that.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
I'll tell you, Madoka Magica is one of those shows that you want to go back and rewatch multiple times because there's so much you get out of it on the second and third and fourth and all that.
But that has got to be the best sacrifice, death I have probably ever seen, because it's this idea that it's not an equivalent exchange thing. It's not it's not some value where it's oh yes, a life for a life. It's a life for the hope that this person who is now a twisted monster won't feel alone.
Right. Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, guys. Final fight right here.
Okay.
This one is
Avatar, Last Airbender.
Go. If you haven't, left already, come on, dude. Leave now. Get out of here. Mm-hmm. This is an obvious one for those that are fans of Avatar: Last Airbender. Mm-hmm. This is the fight between Zuko and Azula. The final fight.
Not the fight between Aang and Ozai.
No, this is the fight between Zuko and Azula, their final Agni Kai in front of the Fire Palace. And, this is a fight where it's different in that it involves Katara. But, of course, we're talking about the point where the music starts playing, and it's somber, and it's sad. And it's his two siblings that have been essentially brought into this conflict, not of their own choices. They have come to this point of their own choices, but the whole environment to set up this fight was from one of the most screwed up families in animation.
Yep.
And Ozai, you really feel like he's kind of the villain in this fight. Azula, you definitely know Azula has to go down.
Right.
Like, there is maybe some sympathy for Azula, but it is not a thing of where you're hoping Azula wins by any stretch of this whole thing.
She needs to go down.
She needs to be done.
And they built up to this fight in an amazing way with Azula's descent into insanity.
Yes. In the 4-episode kind of setup of the finale, Azula not only watches everything kind of fall to pieces around her, but she realizes how just completely screwed up everything is.
And this is one of the things that makes it so good. Mm-hmm. It's not even... This was the thing that made me think that, okay, if Bakugo did win the tournament, it would be a hollow victory kind of a thing.
Sure. Because
of what they did with Azula. Because they made it so that she got everything that she ever wanted, and she feels empty. Like it's not enough.
Well, not only that, she gets it in all the ways that are just wrong.
Yes.
And it's obvious. Like, she's not having it.
No.
She's trying to make the most of it, but she ends up basically going down this spiraling path of self-destruction all the way up until the point of the fight, culminating right before the fight with her hallucinating and seeing her mother in the mirror, and that scene alone...
Like, we always knew Azula was crazy, and there's the villains where they're crazy, like, oh yeah, they're just sick and twisted and amoral and all that stuff.
Right.
But there's a difference between like crazy and literally crazy.
Right.
And when Ursa shows up in the mirror, Azula is not even surprised. Mm-hmm. She just says, "What are you doing here? Like, this has happened.
This has happened before." Mm-hmm. Oh. That's easily inferred, but I think a lot of people don't get that because the idea is that Azula is so gone now that she's lost touch with reality. So when the fight happens, it's another clever way to actually nerf your character at a point where they're also very buffed up by the comet's power.
Yep.
So when Zuko shows up, he's very aware. There's something off of her. She is slipping.
Right. Because otherwise there is no way he'd be able to win.
No way he'd be able to beat Azula. Like, even points earlier on in the show where you see him have a pretty good fight against Azula, it's very clear that if this was to be a one-on-one duel, Azula just
wiped
wins.
the floor with him. Yeah.
And Katara being there adds a little bit of context to the whole thing, especially with how when their portion of the fight ends with Zuko and Azula. But Azula's conversation with Zuko right before the fight is perfect because she gives him the typical, let's settle this, the way it was always meant to be. Agni Kai, you're on. And she kind of smiles like, all according to Keikaku.
Yeah.
And they have their thing of, wait, this is stupid. Let's fight her 2-on-1. She can't beat both of us. And he's like, no, I understand. She's losing it, and I don't want anyone else to get hurt. And it's perfect foreshadowing for Katara potentially being hurt because she's still there. And when the fight starts, there's this really sad line where Azula goes, I'm sorry it had to end this way, brother. And she says, no, you're not. And then she kind of like...
She just smiles.
I almost want to try and act it out, but it's this... You have to see the scene
Grey
again.
Delisle does an amazing job. Dante Bosco does an amazing job.
Sure her name is now Grey Griffin, but you are a fantastic voice actress.
Yep.
And this role in particular cemented you, in my mind, as one of the greatest ever because of the way you have this... like almost sadistic, sarcastic tone at the end, but it's so sad in that you realize Azula's 14 years old.
Yeah, we forget about that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And she doesn't act like it. She acts
No.
like she grew up way too fast, way too young. Because she did. But also, when the fight finally starts, the way they animate her kind of leering at him and kind of being crooked with her shoulders and stuff, it's almost like she's possessed. And then when the firebending actually starts, they start this really sad, slow music.
It's not what you would expect. You would expect a fight to have like some, hype music or whatever, like what One Punch Man did,
Right.
But this is and you realize like you've been looking forward to this, and then you realize like, oh, that's right. These are two siblings that are trying to kill each other on their own, basically at their home.
Yeah. It's really sad. Because even though you want Zuko to win, because Zuko has gone through such an arc at this point, you are realizing he can't just kill her. It's kind of in the way that Zuko couldn't just kill Ozai. Zuko's not a killer. Like, there's multiple points in the show where you see him duel people, and he comes really close to killing people. Like, he gets really close, and he has every reason to. And these are people that have less of a reason to kill than Azula. Right. Azula is the source of much of his suffering.
Oh yeah.
I mean, more so his dad, but Azula indirectly through Ozai.
Everything.
Yeah, and everything. Yeah. So when they get to the point where the fight starts to go into just the spectacle of the whole thing, and the fire choreography and everything, it's beautiful. There's a point where Zuko starts to turn it in his favor, and Azula starts to get scared, and she starts panicking and just kind of relying more on raw power than actually finesse.
Yep.
And Zuko is moving like a well-oiled machine, just executing attacks, and countering.
And one thing I want to point out, well, a couple things. One, a lot of Zuko's moves, they're moves that his other antagonists have done. His thing where he parts the fire, like putting his hands down, Zhao did that.
Zhao, thank you.
Zhao did that. Yeah. And it does so much just to show how much he's grown and like learned over time. We haven't seen him do any of that before. We've never seen him do that parting the fire thing until now.
Yeah.
And also the fact that no one wants Azula to win. Like, that is easy.
No, there probably are some people, but the point is, most people don't.
But most people don't.
Yeah.
Like, Azula is about as bad as it gets. But instead of making it be something where not necessarily getting sympathy with Azula, but just making you pity her.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say a lot of people don't pity her, but if there were a lot of people I remember that said, once I watched those 4 episodes of the finale, I really pitied Azula. And it's not just the part where she really snaps at the end of the fight and she just breaks into a mess. It's the whole progression leading up to it.
Yeah.
And the way the fight kind of culminates for Zuko is he executes this it's almost a point where you might laugh, but it's this point where it's almost beautiful. He goes into what would look like almost like a breakdancing move, and he puts this perfect circle of fire that comes out, and it hits her just right. She blocks it, and the music stops suddenly, and there's this dramatic shift where she lands, and she loses her breath like completely, and she's hurt, and the music stops, and you're pulled into it really quickly, and she gets up like a hurt animal, and she's just growling, and he's like taunting her, like, what's the matter? No lightning? Afraid I'll redirect it? And that's a plot point from the previous stuff. And this is one of the greatest, terrifying lines. She's like, oh, I'll show you lightning.
And, like, the way that the lightning looks when she's, like, summoning it and stuff.
So chaotic.
It's so chaotic and terrifying, but amazing. Like, Ozai, whenever he did his lightning, I was always kind of just like, oh, whatever, he's doing lightning. It's just this...
It felt more like Palpatine.
Yeah, it felt more like Palpatine, but this was some kind of, like,
storm,
dark sorceress storm, like, and you're just like, oh...
You're feeling perfectly safe for Zuko for the split second, but then you realize all too quickly Katara's in the background. You go, no. And in that moment, Azula kind of flicks her eyes over to Katara, and you go, crap. And in that split moment, she launches the lightning at Katara, and Zuko moves to defend against it. And you know in your head, Zuko has to live. But there's this split second where you'll probably doubt, wait a minute. This is an arc. He could die here. And then you realize, wait, no, don't die. And then he blocks it, but it passes through his heart.
Yep.
He sends it back up, but he's lying there on the ground, and it does not look good.
And here's the thing. They already established healing from a lightning attack, right?
Right.
With Aang. But that was they very cleverly said, "Oh, that's a one-use item, right? That we don't have anymore."
Yeah.
And they do a pause between Zuko actually like absorbing the lightning and stuff, and when they cut to it being shot up into the sky.
Right.
So that you're like, "Oh crap, he didn't do it."
Yeah, there's a really pregnant pause where you're like, your breath is held, and then you see it arc up into the sky, and you go, okay.
Okay, there's a chance.
Right, and then Katara goes to help him, and then the lightning arcs and almost hits her, and then the most chilling and almost like scary part is Azula's just cackling, laughing, and it's Great Alau, Great Griffin just killing it with the voice acting. The fight, of course, ends at some point, and Azula, by Katara's cleverness, and it's fantastic.
Yep. And
Azula breaks down into a snotty, messy, tearing, just crying, just mess, and she's broken.
Like it was so the perfect way to end it, because especially in a show like Avatar where it's TBY7, you can't just like execute somebody, especially if it's a family member that is technically still a kid.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. But it was so fitting. It was so satisfying, and at the same time, like the first time I watched it, I was just like, holy crap. All the other times I rewatched it, like the next 10 times, I actually looked away.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Like it was.
In fact, you actually end up being one of two characters. There's Katara, who's kind of having trouble looking at it. She kind of shuts her eyes and looks away. And Zuko, no, he's staring right at her. Like, this is important because this is solidifying that she no longer has any power over him.
Yep.
She's been beaten. She's been defeated. I can now no longer be afraid of her.
Yep.
There's a whole lot of context to it.
Here's another thing that I like to think about. Zuko's staring at her, watching her, basically, and it's almost like it's this reminder to him. Like, this is what I could have turned into. Like, he wasn't Azula, but it's like,
if the circumstances were switched, he might have become
that could have been me.
Mm-hmm. It's really good storytelling. So props to Mike and Brian for one of, in my opinion, one of the greatest fights in animation history, because it has the right context, has the right spectacle, has the right choreography, is so personal, the right characters, and it basically everything going for it.
Oh yeah.
I know a lot of people would have wanted Zuko to be the one to actually stop Azula, but in the writing sense of it, even with Azula being, crazy like this.
She was just so much more powerful.
She was so much more powerful, and even if she had focused the lightning on Zuko, we don't necessarily know if he would have been able to fully redirect it. So it's good that they leave the actual Zuko versus Azula thing slightly ambiguous, even though Zuko was winning towards that point in the fight. Yep. So good stuff. All right, so if you're done with spoilers, this is where you would want to be. We're gonna now move into Q&A. And just get right into it. Mm-hmm. So, Jacob, first question, I'll pose it to you. WA asks, what kind of semblance or quirk would you want? I think we've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked the idea of like a reality marble because I love the Skandar in Infinite Zero.
Pulling people into your own dimension.
But that doesn't exactly work for a semblance or quirk, I think. So.
Okay, I think that's not bad, though. Mine would be basically something along the lines of being able to see the future and predict it to some extent.
How do you think exposition can be handled in a good way? And by the way, these questions are by WA.
Yeah.
So exposition handled in a good way.
Showing, not telling?
Showing, not telling. Yeah. That basically gets rid of the exposition, right?
Well, it can be there. You just recognize it.
Or at least to like supplement it or something.
It hides it.
Right. It hides it. If you do need to do actual like exposition, right? You can't just show certain things. Because sometimes you can't, or it would just take too long. Dialogue can be a great way if, and this is a big if.
Yeah.
If there is a reason for one person to have to explain it to someone else.
Yep. And that's how a lot of people do it.
Right. But the thing is, there needs to be an established reason why, one, this person knows all the stuff. Mm-hmm. Why they need to tell this person because they don't know. A lot of times stories will do that with like a stranger in a strange land, like Harry Potter or whatever.
Right.
And it needs to be done in a way where it is engaging. Like the actual act of them telling them the stuff is not just dead boring.
Yeah. All right. Next question for IWA. Best world building you've ever come across in media? What is it? I would say Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I would say Lord of the Rings, you just can't top it.
You can't top it. If you haven't read the Silmarillion and you want to go through basically a history book of world building.
But that's I would say weaker world building because it's strictly a textbook.
Okay,
I would say the Lord of the Rings novels in particular are one of the best ones there.
Yeah,
this ties into kind of one of the next ones here. The next question by WA is favorite book series or recommendations. And I just got to say, if you haven't read Lord of the Rings and you like reading books, you kind of have to. You kind of owe it to yourself because it's kind of the grandfather of all good fantasy right now.
Yep.
I'm sure there are other fantasy books out there that are even older than Lord of the Rings that are more influential in certain areas. But for kind of classical fantasy, or you may even say like high fantasy nowadays, this is what you need to read.
Most fantasy nowadays just basically rips off stuff
Lord of the Rings
from Tolkien.
Yeah.
I would say either Song of Ice and Fire series or the Red Rising trilogy.
Sure. Advice for someone trying to start writing. This is just definitely for you, Jacob. Should I just start writing fanfic and trash and hope to get better?
Okay, so short answer, no. What you focus on, you find. So if you start writing like trash fan fiction, whatever,
you'll just get better at doing that.
You'll get better at doing that.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend that. I would start
stories?
Writing stories, just stories in general. Like
write some bad stories because
they can be bad. Yeah, you'll get better over time.
It will happen. Yeah. I would say that's where I would add to it. My thing, what I did is I used to be a GM or DM for a lot of tabletop RPGs things, and what I would do is I would just write NPCs nonstop, just for fun, and I would write one paragraph stories over and 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 over again, to where I'd have like a big super list of hundreds of NPCs.
And one last thing I would say for starting writing, don't feel like you have to be married to an idea.
Sure.
Right? Because you might come up with just a bad idea and then you want to start over and do something better. But also finish your works if at all possible.
Right. That's why I recommend short stories, because you can finish it easily.
Exactly. Build that habit.
Yep. Same person, WA. What are some good romance animes for someone trying to get into shows with less action and more character-driven stories?
Well,
but romance specifically.
Right. So Toradora.
I really do recommend Toradora.
Toradora is absolutely amazing. You'll love it. Your Line April is another great one. Caleb has not seen that, so I won't go into too much detail about that, but it is a good one. So, yeah.
Okay. Jomabe45 asks, if you have to choose from these three, which would it be? You never watch Avatar: The Last Airbender and never be introduced to it. It's the first one. Okay. Never watch My Hero Academia and never be introduced to it. Okay. Be the only ones with superpowers in the world, but one of you be evil and be the duty of the other brother to stop him. Evil brother cannot be good again.
That sounds like a fated battle between men.
Right? I would say that if I didn't know about the show, it's kind of easy to go, well, I would never know about it. How can you be sad about an experience you never had? Yeah. So right now, My Hero Academia is really good, but Avatar is way better. So I'm glad that I have both.
And while the idea of the third one would be interesting, at least certainly for a story,
that's not practical at all. Why would any of us want to kill the other?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to go with B.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same here.
Same person. What is the most embarrassing moment you had, or what is the funniest prank you pulled off to your brother? Do you want to do the prank or the embarrassing moment?
I'll do. Okay. All right. Now this might not be the best, but this was a good one.
Okay.
So I'm
trying to remember which one it was.
Me and Caleb did summer jobs for a while. We went over. We stayed with our grandma, and we worked for the summers, and then we'd come back and do school. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, there was a point when I got home from work, and Caleb was off at some weekly thing, right? And I was like, oh, the house is empty, so I kept all the lights off.
I don't remember this.
He comes in, and this is, and I know this might not seem like a very original prank, but he comes in, he's turning on the lights, he thinks he's the only one there. I jump out, I scare the crap out of him. And now the great part about this, when scaring brothers, you kind of have to maintain some distance when you do it, otherwise you'll get slugged,
or you can get punched. That's right.
But this was perfect because he's coming into this empty house. I can hide literally anywhere. Yeah. I come out, I'm still 10 feet from him, but his back's turned. He just about jumped out of his skin. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I sort of remember that. I would say one of the most embarrassing moments for me is probably like ripping my pants. Like one time I was okay, so I was basically doing water skiing. You know, where you're on the little pad thing there and you're going to do this there. My shorts ripped, and I was on the little water ski thing, and I'm holding on to something, so I can't like fix my pants, my water shorts, and I get to a point where the boat slows down, and I basically come up to the side, and now everyone can just look to the right, and I'm like full like spread butt cheeks like right there, and I don't think there was anyone there I liked, but I was young enough to where I was like, oh, I'm forever ruined like by this. A lot of my close friends were on there, ones that I wasn't comfortable with this whole thing. So that's probably one of my most embarrassing moments. From the same person, if you had the chance of meeting any person, dead, alive, fictional, anything counts, and or historical, who would it be, and what would you ask him or her? That's tough.
That is tough.
Because if I met a fictional person, it'd be weird to ask them things because the author is the one that's, dictating what they do. So maybe it'd be a real person. I would really like to meet, like, one of the Renaissance artists. I would also maybe like to meet, like, if I didn't have to die or something, someone, like, a really long time ago from, like, ancient history, like Alexander the Great, and be like, I would like try to like tell him like, okay,
Alexander the Great, the actual one, or the one
actual
from Fate Zero?
The actual Alexander the Great,
because they're
and
very
like,
different people.
What's your deal? Like tell me your story, maybe a little bit more. Because I think knowing things from people that we only know so much about would be kind of cool. Maybe someone alive though. I'd want to meet like Elon Musk and just have coffee. With
Since
him
you said anything counts, I'm gonna one up you on that, Caleb.
Oh no, here we go.
I would talk to my future self.
Oh, you're cheating. You're cheating. And what would you ask yourself?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. What would you wish you had known when you were my age? And, what should I do and all that stuff?
Yeah,
what are the best stories? What should I do for, like, promoting books and stuff like that?
Sneaky. All right. Have you ever had a show or anime that you love and thought was amazing to be destroyed or almost the biggest disappointment ever?
On the new season?
What was it?
Well, so there's this thing called Haruhi, which had a thing called Endless 8. But I already knew that was coming. So.
Sure. I want to say that recently, this is one that I know has just been brought up a bit. I really liked the beginning and middle of ReZero. And the way that ended was just garbage. It was just bad. And I really have, like, it's irreparably damaged for me. So that's probably what it was for me. There's probably other ones that are more, but that was easy to think of.
The ending of that was amazing, but
we don't know
really
what's happening
salty.
in Volume 3 yet. So this one's a question from Sean Kenny. What would be your dream RWBY fight matchup, and why? And it could be something we might actually get, like Blake and Yang versus Adam, or something crazy impossible like Neo versus Pyrrha, or Tuxin versus Shopkeep. Well, it's funny because this ties into our RWBY card game that we're making, where you can essentially fight 4v4
whatever team
combination you want of any characters in RWBY you want. I want to see Zwei versus Salem, because Zwei is obviously the god of light, and once he reveals his true form...
But can Salem really stand against something like that?
I think Salem is actually, influenced or being possessed by the god of darkness.
Okay.
So it'll essentially be brothers and brothers fighting with their avatars.
Fair enough.
And Zwei will unleash his true godlike Corgi powers. Yep.
Here's mine. So this is a team of 4. Neo, Coco, Zwei, and what was the other one? Dang it, I hadn't thought of this. Pretty much anyone else added to that mix. Nora, yes.
Yeah.
Those 4 going up against basically anyone else.
Everyone else.
Or everyone else. I would
that would
be
be pretty
with
impressive.
That.
That would be pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I'd pay money to see that. All right, Martin4 asks, my question is, the way MHA is going, and if it just gets better, could it possibly dethrone Avatar as your favorite anime ever? If not, what do you think MHA would need to be your favorite, and or at least the same level as Avatar?
No.
Avatar is in a league of its own right now.
Yeah, it's kind of transcended this plane of existence.
It's a bit crazy. I have rewatched Avatar so many times, guys.
Right.
Like so many times.
Over a dozen.
I've introduced a couple people to the first season of MHA, but I've only rewatched that. And MHA right now is special.
It is.
But it's not Avatar yet.
See, here's one of the other things.
What would it need, though, Jacob?
I think we would need to have been introduced to it 5 or 10 years earlier.
Maybe.
And we'd need to watch it about 10 more times. and it would need to have been concluded in a very, 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 very satisfying way.
I think that's probably the problem, is that MHA, we can't see where it'll conclude.
Right.
Because what they set up was an indeterminate goal in terms of time, with
Exactly.
Deku becoming the greatest hero of all time. And theoretically, you could do that 30 years from now, and Deku could still be working towards becoming the greatest hero of all time.
Exactly. It's a lifetime journey.
Yeah, and I don't see that as being something to where we can actually have this show
Right.
know where it will end.
Yeah.
So this is how it could end. I mean, this is how it could be, at least on the same level, is have the ending be near perfect.
Yeah.
Have the journey be the build up towards an ending that's near perfect.
Like FMAB level, or like Code Geass level.
Ending, yeah.
Or Avatar level.
Or Avatar level, yeah.
Yeah.
Great question, though. Yugo XGC asks, looking at the current development of gaming technology, all the VR stuff and AI, robotics, all the kind of anti-robot propaganda for an inevitably dark future, Rise Rebellion of Machines being shown as the most likely future, do you guys think that getting that future would be more of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or do you think something positive is more likely with humans becoming a tech-based race? Wow, that's really interesting question.
Yeah.
I think it's not that simple in that it's going to be one or the other. I think we're going to be integrating with AI and technology along those lines much quicker than we really let on. Not like next generation, like this generation. I think that there's going to be some really cool things that will come of it, and some really not cool things. But I don't have any specific kind of predictions or prophecies, if you will.
There was someone who said this. I can't remember who it was, but they basically said everyone's worried about AIs like taking over and becoming overlords, and humans being their slaves and stuff.
Right.
And, like, that's not actually what you need to worry about. It's about an AI, like a real AI, in the hands of a bad person.
Right. I agree.
Because that's
terrifying. Right now, actually, you have a very good example of what happens when an AI algorithm is actually being used in an ineffective way by people, with the whole YouTube ad blocking apocalypse thing. That's just an AI that's running one algorithm, and it's using it in such a way that's abusing its power.
Right.
It's not end of the world stuff or anything crazy.
But that's hurting a lot of people.
Ruining a lot of people's lives right now.
Yeah.
And that's a thing where I think this will end up going, is people will have to reevaluate how economics works when you have something that has the production and maintenance capacity of an AI, of a true learning AI. And I think we will need to evolve as a species in order to be ready for that. But I'm not scared of it. I'm a more optimistic person about the future, and I am not a believer in humanity's ultimate kind of purging from the planet.
Yeah.
So a lot of people like to throw really fear-based ideology out there.
I say most of that's just media propaganda.
Well, not that it's media propaganda, that it's actually focusing on the wrong things, and that it's manipulative. Because I believe a lot of it is actually right.
Yeah, bad stuff does happen.
No, but not only that, bad stuff is happening right now.
Yeah.
But if you think about what this is more of an example of, is that what you focus on, you find. And if our world is consistently going to be focused on the things that could potentially bring us all to some destruction in that respect, then it will happen.
Right.
But if good people, individual people like us all start, focusing on things that are beyond that, and actually start working towards things that aren't those things, instead of working in how to react to those potential things, we'll build a better, brighter future together. Wow, that sounded very political. It's kind of like a politician speech.
But I would say it's the kind of stuff that makes us really like those like dreamer, optimistic protagonists, even if they're not necessarily executed very well. But that what makes that idea appealing is because we know that, to some extent, if we focus on something, that's what we'll end up finding.
Yes.
So that idea of looking at the good and it being able to perpetuate that, as opposed to looking at the bad and then, bad stuff happens. I mean, hey, that's what happened to Sayaka.
Yeah, so, guys, this is basically the end of the podcast, but thank you so much for your awesome questions.
Yes.
It was great talking to you guys about some of our favorite fights. We did get a little bit long-winded there, so this is probably one of those really long podcasts and stuff. But thank you for sticking around until now. If you want to catch up with more of us, go check out our Discord and stuff. We love to have conversations with you guys like this, and these Q&As are a great example of the kind of conversations we could end up having in the text channels or the voice channels. Links, of course, in the description below. All right, guys, we'll see you again next time. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.